Good morning. Thank you for joining us for the third and final segment of our three-part series on food insecurity and hunger in Bucks County. My name is Monica Wenninger, and I'm the co-president of the League of Women Voters of Bucks County. The League of Women Voters is a century-old organization dedicated to encouraging informed and active participation in government. We are nonpartisan and never support or oppose candidates or parties, but we do study issues of importance to voters and take positions on those issues. We are committed to creating and promoting a diverse and inclusive environment in our organization and in the areas in which we work. And as residents of Bucks County, we recognize the Lenni Lenape and the Delaware people as the original inhabitants and stewards of this land. Federal, state, and local governments make laws and provide funding to address local problems such as food insecurity. And we as voters need to understand those issues so that we can hold our legislators accountable. We hope that this series will help you understand the scope of this problem in our county and what we as concerned citizens can do about it. In this final segment, you'll hear from three speakers who will discuss their particular type of advocacy work, and we hope that this will inspire you to take action. This entire series will be recorded and available on our website, Facebook page, and YouTube channel. If you are joining us for the first time today, we encourage you to watch the first two parts on our YouTube channel. League members Kathy Beveridge and Liz Fritsch will be hosting today's panel discussion. Liz will be the discussion moderator, and Kathy will be our Zoom host. Kathy, you begin?
Thanks, Monica. Okay, welcome everyone. It's great to have you here with us for this session. It's my pleasure to give you a quick overview of the Zoom webinar tools. If you don't see one of the options I'm describing along the toolbar, click on the ellipsis, the three dots, or sometimes it says more, and you should see additional options. Hopefully you can see that we have enabled the closed caption live transcript feature for today's program. We hope this is useful to you. If you like it, do nothing and it will continue throughout the program. If you'd rather not see the captions, hover your cursor over the window where you see me so that the tools appear along the bottom of the window. Click on the little box with CC in it and choose to disable the feature. The captions tend to appear at the bottom of the window where you see me talking. If you want to move them to another location, you can hover your cursor over the box where the words are appearing, a little hand may appear, and then click and drag the box to another location in the window. As participants, you don't need to worry about being seen or heard during this program. In a Zoom webinar, participants are not visible and they engage in the discussion through Q&A feature and the chat box. We encourage you to engage in our discussion using the Q&A feature. Hover over the window where you're seeing me now to have the toolbar appear across the bottom of the window. Click on Q&A and type in your question. If you like, feel free to indicate in parentheses the name of the panelist you'd like to answer the question. If you see that somebody else has already entered a question you wanted to ask, feel free to upvote that question by clicking on the thumbs up icon next to the question. We will get to as many questions as possible during the session. Please do be sure to type your questions in the Q&A section, not the chat window. We're only using the chat to share some supplemental information with you, like any websites mentioned by the panelists. You can copy them from the chat window and paste them into a Word document so that you can visit those sites after the webinar. Thank you. Enjoy the conversation. Liz, it's your turn. There she is. Oh, you're muted, Liz.
Welcome to all of you. My name is Liz Fritsch. I'm a member of the League of Women Voters. And as you've heard, this is the third part of a three-part series on hunger and food insecurity in Bucks County. In the first session, the Bucks County United Way presented an overview of hunger in the county, drawing upon data and information gleaned from a variety of government and private sources. We also heard from the primary anti-poverty program in the county about its wide-ranging food distribution and education services, and from the Bucks County YWCA about specific issues and barriers to food access facing immigrant members of our community. In the second session, we focused on hunger and lack of access to nutritious food affecting children and students of all ages and impacting their health, learning, and success in school. We heard about lunch programs from the Bucks County YMCA and about programs for college students from the Bucks County Community College. We also heard from a former legislator and professor at Bucks and Montgomery County Community Colleges about some of the proposed and enacted legislation focused on aid to food programs for students. We will round out our three-part series today with presentations from three more organizations: the Bucks County Housing Group, the Rolling Harvest Food Rescue Program, and the Greater Philadelphia Coalition Against Hunger. Each of these agencies addresses the issue of hunger and food insecurity in its own unique and critical way, and the presenters will talk about their efforts and about what they see as opportunities and challenges going forward. Following the presentations, we will engage in a discussion with the panelists about ways in which each of us can make a meaningful difference to reduce hunger and food insecurity in our county. Bucks County is the third wealthiest county in Pennsylvania, and no one should ever be going to school or work or to bed hungry because of lack of food. I would like to introduce our three panelists. Maddie Burgess is the food pantry manager at the Bucks County Housing Group and co-chair of the Bucks County Hunger and Nutrition Coalition. Maddie started volunteering at the two housing group pantries and now oversees pantry operations. She has a passion for addressing the issue of food insecurity and works tirelessly to make sure the pantries are able to offer healthy, nutritious food. She holds a Bachelor of Science in Biochemistry from the University of St. Andrews in Scotland. Kathy Snyder is the founder and executive director of the Rolling Harvest Food Rescue Program. Following a sales career in broadcasting, both in the States and abroad, Kathy volunteered at a local food pantry in New Hope and was awakened to the depth of food insecurity in New Hope in southeastern PA. Realizing there was an untapped resource in the local agricultural community to help fill the nutrition gap faced by food pantries, Kathy reached out to local farmers. Since 2010, Kathy has grown Rolling Harvest Food Rescue from an initial connection between one food pantry and one farm to a vibrant network of volunteers, farms, and food producers and hunger relief sites. Kathy is committed to raising awareness about the hidden face of local hunger, food waste, and food insecurity, and offers leadership through public speaking engagements on actions we can all take to nourish our neighbors in need. Kathy Fisher joined the Greater Philadelphia Coalition Against Hunger in 2014 after nearly 20 years of social service and advocacy experience. Many of those years were spent working at Public Citizens for Children and Youth, focused on family economic security issues. As policy director at the Coalition Against Hunger, she performs research and data analysis, presents information to elected officials, service providers, and community members, and works with a wide range of anti-hunger partners to advocate for effective policies and programs to fight hunger. She has her JD and MSW degrees from the University of Pennsylvania. So welcome to all of our talented panelists today, and we're so glad to have you with us. And we will start off our program with a presentation from Maddie. So Maddie, I hand it over to you.
Thank you. So I work for the Bucks County Housing Group. And so our organization exists to help people, low to moderate income people with housing. And people in crisis through the provision of affordable housing and all the things that go with that. So if you could go, we've been around for about 40 years. We opened the first homeless shelter in the county. Yeah, the next slide, please. So our programs at the moment, we have homeless and housing programs, and we have low-income rental units. We do housing counseling, and we have a veterans housing assistance program. But what I'm responsible for is the food pantries. If you could go to the next slide, please. So we operate two food pantries in the county. One of them is one of the busiest. In the before times, we used to operate kind of like shops. So people could come and pick up, choose what they needed. And we've always tried to have a healthy option. And we were very proud of our little farmers market that we had at Doylestown, so people could get access to the fresh, healthy vegetables that they wanted. As you can see, these are all volunteers in those pictures. We would never take pictures of our clients for their privacy. So people ask us who comes to the food pantry. And I always say it's our neighbors. You never know who is going to be impacted by food insecurity. It isn't just poverty. When you think about the high cost of housing here, which in our organization we're acutely aware of, medical bills, all sorts of things bring people to the pantry. You can't tell when someone's walking up the driveway if they're going to be a volunteer or a client. People don't look hungry, so they're just our neighbors. And as you can see from this, at our food pantries, the folks that come, it's stayed consistent over the years, about 36% of those people are children. And that's why it's so important that we can give people access to that healthy food, because it's so important for their development and all the things that children need to have food. If you go to the next slide, please. People ask us where our food comes from. And so we spend a lot of time trying to get food. We can get some from food banks, and a food bank is a big organization like Full Abundance. And in some ways, the Opportunity Council operates as a food bank. We can collect food from them. So we get access to some government food that's administered by the Opportunity Council. And then we can get rescue food. I don't want to annoy Kathy by saying that Rolling Harvest is rescue food. It kind of is. But also Grocers Against Hunger is a great program where we drive to grocery stores and we pick up food that otherwise could not be sold. So that would be things like a bag of oranges where one orange is moldy. So we can take out the moldy orange and give people the food. It's a great program because it stops food waste as well. I'm really very appreciative of all the local stores that help with that. And that's administered by Full Abundance. And also really important is the community donations. That would include the United Way, people who help that, churches, civic groups, private individuals, because that food, to receive government food, you're supposed to have an income that's 150% of poverty. And sometimes people, they have more income than that, but they have more expenses. So we can still help people out with the community food so that anybody that needs food can come and get it. So this COVID epidemic, it was kind of very sobering because we had a couple of people who were private individuals who used to give us food who had to come and get food from the pantry, which was very difficult for them. So we could go on to the next slide, please. So the requirements to run a food pantry are many. The most important one that we feel at the housing group is to respect the dignity of our customers. It's really hard to turn to an adult and say, I need food, because that's the kind of society we live in. It's hard to ask for food. So we also do not discriminate. We adhere to civil rights guidelines. It's really important to us. And then obviously we have to store food in a safe and sanitary manner. And everyone's trained, our staff and volunteers are trained in food safety. So we operate a bit like a food store. We have to have the same kind of ways of keeping people safe. And what's really important is is to have the agency collaboration, because we reach out to other organizations for help, and we also help other organizations. We can get unexpected things. We work with the SPCA so that we can get access to pet food, which you can't buy with SNAP. And so we can help people with pet food. And it's great to be able to mesh together and help people. So the next slide, please. So COVID was a huge challenge to us. We stopped having little shops. We do drive-through and walk-up pantries. And so this is where you can see we've got a huge volunteer force, because we couldn't do that without volunteers. And most food pantries are in that rely almost totally or almost completely on volunteers. At our food pantries last month, we had 60 folks come and help us with distributions. So it takes a village to run these pantries. And I think I mentioned there's so many pantries in the county, partly because of the lack of access to transportation. So it's no good having one central big fancy pantry if people can't get there. So the next slide will show us the sort of things that we had to do because of COVID. We had to install a tent, as you could see from that last picture. We had to change to purchasing a lot of food rather than getting donations. The Grocers Against Hunger program, we lost a lot of food donations because people were panic buying. So there wasn't leftover food because it was all being bought, which made a huge difference to us in the ability of us to give food to people. We're very proud of the fact that we never closed for COVID. We closed for snow, but not for COVID. So people ask us how you can help a food pantry. From my final slide, please. And obviously, donate food. But if you're going to donate food, you should really call the pantry that you want to help and ask them what they need. At our pantries, we especially are interested in getting healthy food for our clients. We actually have a list of preferred food. But also, I tell people as well, you can ask people, what do you feed your family? And what do you like to eat? Because chances are our neighbors would like to eat the same thing. We also, currently, we do ask for gift cards because we can help people with special diets by giving them gift cards so they can purchase low salt food, or if they have special dietary needs for religious reasons, we can help them. And also, pantries need money for overhead. Every pantry, virtually every pantry has a freezer, have to pay for the electric, have to keep the lights on. The next thing you can do for your pantry is call them up and see if they need volunteers, because most of them do. And then, as we're going to talk later, advocate. So you can join, anybody can join the Hunger and Nutrition Coalition. And Kathy Fisher is going to be talking about how you can advocate in other ways. So thank you for your time.
Well, thank you, Maddie. That's an excellent presentation, and I thank you for, I know you have a lot more you could tell us about the pantry. I thank you for doing it so succinctly. I do have a question. I actually know the housing group through its efforts in the housing area. And how is it that an organization which was founded to provide transitional housing and to help people facing homelessness, how is it that you found yourself getting so involved in food insecurity?
Well, because it's because in this county rents are so high that people struggling to pay the rent, sometimes you can help them out with food. And also, our pantries are actually at sites where we have some transitional housing, and it becomes apparent that people need help with that. That up until now, SNAP benefits aren't enough to feed your family. So we're really providing a supplement.
So you're finding that people, and I've heard this all too often, that people after paying their rent or after paying their mortgage, they don't have enough money for food. They're more likely to skimp on the food because they have to pay their rent or they have to pay their mortgage. Is that what you find among the people?
Yes, it's utilities, and also we find medical bills are a huge barrier. Sometimes people will pay those. They'll pay for medication, and then they'll cut down on their food budget, and it's actually very concerning because we've had clients say, I cut my pills in half, so I don't have to buy so many. I mean, that to me is terrible, but that's what happens. People do the best they can.
And you mentioned one of the initiatives I see that came about through COVID was an urban gardening program. Whereby you try to teach people how to start their own garden or grow their own food? Or
yes, we're very excited about that. We're working with the Rotary in Doylestown, and also our place in Morrisville. We're going to work with a church, and they're going to set up some raised beds, and we're hoping to educate people how to grow their own food. Educate me too. I'm kind of excited about it.
Yeah,
and the master gardeners are helping us too. So it's important. People can actually buy, you can buy food seedlings with SNAP benefits. So it will empower people as well to grow their own food.
Another thing I see is that you were able to purchase a more refrigeration capacity. Is that through public monies, through COVID relief monies, or?
It was from private donations from other organizations. It's important because we really like to concentrate on that fresh produce. The stuff that you walk around the edge of the grocery store tends to be the healthiest, and that's the stuff that needs refrigeration. So
sure.
And Phil Abundance actually gave us a milk fridge, so where we can have some extra fresh dairy as well.
Because that's something that you'll be able to use in years to come. So that's a great great thing to spend your money on.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, well, thank you so much, and we'll come back to you with more questions later. I guess one last question is, where would people go to find out the location of pantries? Would this be on your website or Facebook page, or where?
Actually, the best way is to go to the Bucks County Opportunity Council's webpage, and it lists most food pantries. Though there are some little private ones that you might find that aren't on there, but that's the best way to find the bigger ones.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, well, we will move on to Kathy Snyder, and we're going to begin Kathy's presentation with a short video that Kathy has given to us. So we'll bring that up.
I was volunteering at a food pantry, and I looked around and I said, why are we giving away this junk? I wouldn't eat this way. I wouldn't serve this to my family. And that's how it started, going out to a farmer's market and saying, hey, do you have an extra cucumber or 5? Rolling Harvest Food Rescue provides the freshest, locally grown fruits and vegetables from our partner farmers right here in the area. And we provide them to food pantries and soup kitchens and hunger relief organizations that couldn't possibly be able to provide expensive, locally grown produce, especially organic, which is a big percentage of what we do. We are dealing with small family farms. The smallest farm is 5 acres. The largest farm is only 300. The farmers go into this because of their love of wanting to feed people and feed them well. This is really all about the farmers and their generosity. They know that Rolling Harvest will take that surplus or that excess, and we're going to find really good homes for everything.
Every farmer knows that one of the heartbreaks is that not all the great food that you have sells at market. It's important that the people picking it up and taking it somewhere else, the distributor, treat it like gold and understand the value of that food, understand that it has to be packed right, and it has to be distributed immediately. If you want people to eat vegetables, no matter who they are, they have to look great. Rolling Harvest works really hard to make our produce be as beautiful when they deliver it as it is when they pick it up.
Just because you're poor and up against it doesn't mean that you deserve bad produce that's going rotten. We want to give people good food, healthy food, presented nicely, as we would expect to be served ourselves. Rolling Harvest, we're really grateful for them. They bring us food from the farms. It's always fresh, it's always lovely. And also they've made the connections with farmers for us. So it would be really difficult for us to go to farm to try and ask them for produce. And the fact that they've got all these wonderful connections, it's great.
We can really feel good about sharing this food with what's come to be known as food insecure population, which happens to be 17% of us, even here in wealthy suburbs. If the farmers can provide us with such an abundance of healthy food, maybe it's one less sick day for a mother at work. Maybe it's a slightly better attention span for a kid at school. And there's so much out here, we're just scratching the surface. When I see someone leave a food pantry with a bag full of fresh, healthy vegetables, I know that that night, or maybe that entire week, they're gonna be eating well. And that's justice.
Well, thank you so much, Kathy, for that lovely video. Makes me want to go out and gather some fresh produce and do some cooking. So would you please continue to tell us a little more about Rolling Harvest?
Thanks, Liz. And I want to thank the League of Women Voters for including Rolling Harvest in this really important conversation. I understand when we have a few minutes to talk, so looking forward to the Q&A at the end of the webinar. So I wanted to highlight, first of all, it's all about the farmers and their amazing generosity. I'm in awe of farmers, and we have been able, this video that I shared is a few years old. So since then, we've actually got relationships now with 43 of our local and regional farmers. We've expanded beyond Bucks County to Montgomery County, to a little bit to Philadelphia, to Hunterdon and Mercer County in New Jersey. We're providing much healthier food for more than 70 emergency feeding programs, and that includes food pantries, shelters, soup kitchens, community meals it's called, and senior housing, summer feeding programs for children, clinics, basically anywhere where the emergency food providers want to have much healthier, fresher choices. We're here to work with you. We're here to provide. It does take a village, as Maddie said. We've got more than 200 volunteers now that enable us to do the work we're doing. It's about the volunteers, it's about the farmers, and it's about furthering the conversation and increasing awareness about food waste. And that's an important connection to make, because when you've got a country where 1 in 5 children is going hungry, but we throw away 35% of the food that is grown and produced here, you know there's a disconnect that's got to be fixed. It's a real opportunity. There are behavioral nudges that we can help with to prevent waste at home. There are policy and legislation initiatives to prevent good, healthy food from going to waste. And this is all part of our Rolling Harvest food rescue journey. I mean, basically, we want to turn every food pantry into a farmer's market, but we're also taking advantage of something that a lot of you listening today may not be aware of. As we peel back the layers of the work we're doing, we're learning so much, and that is that we have an abundance of local farmers in our region, for example. You may not know this, but they
have to grow at least 20% more than they're going to need to satisfy their customer base. And that is such an incredible opportunity to make sure that extra 20% gets rescued. And Maddie, I'm fine with using the word rescue. I'm proud of it, no problem. There's a lot of reasons that they have to grow that surplus. And if you can imagine, especially in the age of global warming and climate change, farmers need to have extra assurances because of weather patterns changing, extreme rain affecting when they can go in the fields, what they can grow, the loss of productivity. It can be navigating pests. It can be navigating disease that ruin an entire crop. So farmers have to diversify. They have to grow a lot more than they need. It can be a labor shortage. It can be a change in taste. Maybe one year kale is the vegetable that everyone's craving. Maybe next year, if we're lucky, it'll be kohlrabi. So these things, in addition to the number one thing that we've all now experienced because of COVID, supply chain disruption, all of these things affect really good food from being harvested, captured, and put into the food system. So that's where we come in. And we will have a farmer call us literally and say, it's going to be 100 degrees tomorrow. My team can't get to the broccoli. It's going to die. And we'll send a team out and get a flatbed truck full of broccoli in a matter of 3 hours. Might have a farmer that will call us and say, it's going to be raining and then we're going to have excessive heat. All my tomatoes will split. So please come and get as much as you can. We're keeping, at this point in the decade we've been doing this, 3.2 million pounds of food have been rescued in this way. And it's kind of mind-blowing when all we wanted to do was just make sure a little bit of produce at a farmer's market was not going to go to waste. Something extraordinary has happened. A few years into this, when the farmers started realizing the impact of this gift, this amazing food, healthy, nutrient dense, they started to say, well, I've got an acre I'm not using. What would you like me to grow for you? A whole new conversation. We were very excited to be able to grow culturally appropriate food and to get foods that never were into the charitable food supply chain before. And this is a big part of our direction forward. We are going to be growing more food. We have a great initiative with farmers, and at Gravity Hill Farm, for the first time, rolling harvest, regional food access hub, and donation fields. And that is an opportunity to grow on 4.5 acres, to have access for food pantries to come when it's convenient for them to pick up. This has never happened before. You want to come Sunday at 7 in the morning? Okay, come on, come take what you need. So we really see this as a way to give access and to create a slight change in this food inequity that we see all around us. We really believe everyone should have access to healthy food, nutritious food. It's a basic human right, and we can do a lot better. Thank you.
Kathy, I think your story is, there I am. Kathy, I think your story is so inspiring. One person having such an impact. And I wonder, we all, I think, admire the fact that you took a germ of an idea that you had while you were volunteering at a food pantry and have built it into the amazing network that it is. What made you think you could accomplish this? What made you think that, yes, I see a need, I see an unmet need, I see a potential here, and I can make this happen?
I think when you are able to identify what you see around you, anybody can do this. You see a social injustice, you see something that's not fair, something that's wasteful, something that should be better. I think any one of us has the power to just take that first step and not be so bogged down by what's going to happen 80 steps down the road. Just take that first step. And when you see more people that understand your vision and want to be part of your vision, and it grows. Nonprofit organizations can often take on a life of their own that right now I could never have imagined now where we would have, when we were 10 years ago. I couldn't imagine that we could have, for example, been able to create such an impactful, huge COVID emergency response. We've put hundreds of thousands of extra pounds of food into our system since COVID hit. And we've been able to subsidize farmers and keep egg farmers alive and every other farmer that's had supply chain disruptions. They can sell to us slightly below wholesale, but they're thrilled to get something to compensate them for this gift. The food is not going to waste, the farmers benefit, and the food stays out of landfill. So all of these things, I mean to say that it can take on a life of its own, and you can't get so bogged down with solving everything. Just take that first step.
So this is actually keeping some of the local farms afloat, would you say? I mean, this is not only helping those who need the wonderful produce that these farms produce, but that this is actually supporting those small local farms that, as you say, are sort of amazing in kind of the dedication of the farmers in keeping afloat, and this is actually helping them as well.
Very much so, and it's a bridge until things can get back to normal. But I want to say one other thing. There's so much momentum. There's a lot of progress. The title of this webinar is Hunger. It doesn't have to be so. And we really are seeing momentum and smart systemic changes. One of which, what we've been doing for years, actually with the help of United Way of Bucks County, we have been giving farmers some compensation when they find it hard to donate. Like they might have to hold on to this food for a while and find a buyer. But if we can pay them a dollar a pound or whatever, they're really thrilled to just let us put it into the charitable food system. And now we have local governments, we have state governments, and we have federal governments seeing the value in what we've been doing for a decade. And a lot of COVID money is coming in to connect local farmers with neighbors in need. So I hope we'll be out of business soon.
Well, I hope so, but it's just a wonderful program. And, you say, well, can there be a win-win-win situation? And it seems to me this is pretty darn close to it benefiting everyone involved. So, so it's, again, inspiration. So we'll be back to you during the discussion, but we'll move on to Kathy Fisher. So Kathy, welcome, and would love to hear from you as well.
Thank you very much. Thanks to everyone who's attending, and thanks to the Bucks County League of Women Voters for having us all here today. I know Maddie and Kathy went over some really important information, and it kind of is a great way to start off my presentation. Believe which will be, oh, there it is, it's on the screen. So you can go to the next slide. This is just a quick overview for people who like a roadmap. This is what I'm going to cover. I won't read each slide to you. Next slide, please. So I'm from the Coalition Against Hunger, the Greater Philadelphia Coalition Against Hunger. So we're located in Philly, but we work in the 5-county region. And I present how we view hunger because I think it's a really helpful way for folks to consider kind of both the enormity of the hunger problem, but also like that there are real things to do at each level to help. So we work with food pantries, primarily in Philadelphia, but we give them capacity building, assistance, training, really support their efforts. Many of the pantries are completely volunteer staff, right? And they need that kind of help. So Maddie's an expert in Bucks County, but there are some people who are doing it who aren't such experts. So that's part of our work. Secondly, we meet people to try to connect them to food longer term. The food pantries are kind of the immediate serve the need the person has. SNAP, which is the Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program. Many of you may know that the old name was food stamps. We have a hotline that people can call to get help applying for SNAP. And having a hotline has been incredibly important during COVID because all the county assistance offices have been closed. And then our third thing is we try to affect policies that affect hunger for the long term. And that's our policy analysis, engagement, and advocacy. Next slide, please. So this is just a little bit about, we have a Race Against Hunger that helps support the pantries. We have a pantry map on our website. Again, that lists, there are about 700 food pantries in the 5-county region. So I imagine the Bucks County Opportunity Council's map for Bucks County is more accurate than ours for Bucks. But we do have counties, all 5 counties, some pantries, and a lot of the Philadelphia ones on our map. And there are 2 links there that are really important for during COVID. So folks can look at this later. Next slide. And then our SNAP enrollment and assistance, again, has been really important during COVID, but even in normal times, a SNAP application is not easy, right? There are a lot of details, there are a lot of documents, there are many things people have to provide in order to show that they qualify. And our hotline counselors walk people through that whole process. They do the application online for the client, help them get all their documents in. And, it's just really simplifies the process for folks who can't get to the county assistance office when it is open, folks with disabilities, folks who have language or literacy issues. There are any number of reasons why it's tough for people to do that on their own. And you can see the hotline number there is 215-430-0556. And we do serve Bucks County. So we encourage you to give that number out to anyone who thinks they might be eligible, and we will screen them and apply and find out if they are eligible. There's also a statewide hotline number there. Again, with COVID, there are times where the wait times on hotlines can be a little bit longer. So we always provide a secondary one, and that's BDT, a partner that works statewide. Next slide, please. And I should have stopped at the beginning to say I apologize if I talk really fast, but I have a lot of slides. So we're going to just try to get through them all. So with advocacy, we advocate at the local, state, and federal level. I'll pause for a moment just to kind of give an overview of the nutrition programs, right? There are a lot of nutrition programs that help people. Most of them are federal. So those are the rules, and the funding is decided at the federal level. And then each state administers those programs. So in Pennsylvania, it's Department of Human Services that is the administrator of SNAP, but it's Department of Health that does WIC. It's Pennsylvania Department of Education that does the child nutrition programs for school meals, summer meals. So it gets a little complicated, but there's advocacy needed at every level. At the federal level around the rules for those programs and the funding levels, at the state level for how the programs are administered. And then even at the local level, my favorite example is school breakfast, right? The rules could be good and the funding, it's never exactly what we want, but that could be good at the federal level. It could be administered well by the state. But if the individual school isn't using practices that really make the breakfast available to kids, such as making kids show up early to get it and not making it available when school starts. There's, a whole host of kind of program level, local level advocacy that can happen to improve the use of programs, and particularly the child nutrition programs. So we really try to work to influence things at each level, which is a lot, but, really where there's the most need. Next slide. Sorry, next slide. So this is just to give you an idea, and these are all pre-COVID numbers, right? Because the way data is kept and the way things are assessed, it's often hard to get real-time data. And I apologize, I did not put Bucks County on here, but I will give you that number in a minute. So pre-COVID, it was about, a little under 12% of Americans, 1 in 9, that were food insecure, almost 11% in Pennsylvania. In Philly, it was 16%, and we actually think it's higher than that. And in Bucks, it was pre-COVID about 7.1%, which is about 44,000 individuals. And this is because things were finally starting to get better after the Great Recession, where it took, about a decade for some people to get back on their feet. And now, of course, with COVID, it's like starting from square one. Next slide. So this is a little bit about the devastating impact COVID has had. This is from the US Census Bureau does what's called a pulse survey since COVID started, and it's released about every 2 weeks. So it's trying to get that finger on the pulse and see what's really happening. It's not as vast, number of respondents in the survey, but you can really see that this is national data. They can't break it down to really individual counties. There is some Pennsylvania data, but so it's almost 1 in 6 adults with children lack sufficient food. The last time the survey was done, so that was a March figure. And granted, we all hope and see that things are getting a little better, but again, with COVID, things have been very unpredictable. Things go up and down in terms of the surges and what needs to shut down. So food insecurity has really grown due to the economic impact of the pandemic and so many people losing income. And you can also see that there's been a real disparate impact. It's families with children and communities of color that have been impacted the greatest by a lot of the job loss and the income loss of COVID. Next slide. And now this is Feeding America, which is the national network of food banks, estimates, right when COVID started, of what they thought child food insecurity might grow to as a result of the pandemic. So you can see for Bucks County, it was for children. And I always use the child figure because it is higher than the general population. It's harder for a parent to get back to work if they have a 2-year-old and can't get childcare because everything's closed because of COVID. So the child rates are slightly higher, but you can see that Bucks County was at 9.4% pre-COVID, and it was predicted to go potentially as high as almost 18%. So we won't know until probably a look back period, which is a little frustrating, but we do know there is a lot more need out there. Next slide. So this is another way of looking at something Maddie touched upon, which is there are a lot of families in Bucks County who need help, but can't actually qualify for the nutrition programs that exist, right? So she mentioned 150% of poverty. The SNAP income limit is 160% of poverty, but that's not that much money, to give you an example. So a family of 4, 160% of poverty is just around $42,000 a year. So you can imagine it's hard to get by on even more than that in Bucks County. So this is a way that Feeding America looks at how many people are food insecure who are actually above the income limits for the nutrition programs. So in Pennsylvania, it's about 32% of families who are food insecure, households that are food insecure, who actually don't even qualify for the federal programs that can help because their income is above the income limit. And in Bucks County, that's even higher. Again, this is pre-COVID. 55% of those who were food insecure in Bucks County were estimated to be above the income limit for the programs that help. And that is why what Maddie does, what Kathy does, what all the food pantries throughout the county does is so important. They're not only serving people who have run out of food for the month because their SNAP isn't enough to get them through the month or their job, but they're also, some of them can't get help from the federal programs. Next slide. And then again, big picture, why is it that people can't afford food? It really is about inadequate income, right? There are other factors that make it hard to get food if you have lack of mobility, if you don't have a car, things like that. But at the root of it is inadequate income. So what I love to say, especially to such an active group, people who want to advocate, people who vote, it's about the minimum wage. It's about paid sick leave. It's about protections for workers so that if they miss a day, they don't lose their job. It's about supporting childcare. I think that's one of the things in recent decades that has changed so much in America. The fourth bullet down on my slide, the other demands on income, right? Medical costs, housing costs, transportation costs, childcare. Some people have really high student loan payments. There's so many things pulling at a family's income that often, and this was said earlier too, I think Liz said it, people skimp on food because they have to pay those other bills. They don't want to get evicted or be overdue on their mortgage. They need to make their car payment. There are things that they absolutely must cover first, so they may skimp on food. And that, again, has them turning to the food pantry, has them turning to SNAP for help. And I think, you know, we all need to recognize that it's just really difficult to make ends meet. Next slide. And again, so another way to think about how important food is to people is it needs to be not just affordable, right? SNAP helps with affordability, the pantries giving away free food help with affordability, but it needs to be accessible and it needs to be appropriate, right? So by accessible, I mean, you know, some families maybe have to walk to the corner store. Your SNAP dollars aren't going to stretch as far if you can't get somewhere that sells food more affordably. If you are disabled, and especially with COVID, you know, people lost their jobs. What if the person who used to give you a ride to the store lost their job and can't do that any longer? Accessing food can be really difficult. And that's why it's incredible and really wonderful that, for instance, Rolling Harvest is bringing fresh food to so many pantries throughout the county. So people who maybe couldn't get to a farmer's market on their own might be able to get that at a food pantry. And then by appropriate, we mean for different health conditions, right? People have allergies, people have different conditions. And again, food could be more expensive to meet some of those requirements that individual needs. And that is also why SNAP doesn't always stretch as far, or why a food pantry might not be able to provide the exact food someone needs. And it's wonderful. Again, I mentioned they sometimes provide food cards to people so they can buy the right food. But that is also why we're such strong believers in SNAP, because that allows people to buy what they need for their family. Next slide. And this is just a very, you know, just tremendous reminder of how much food insecurity costs us as a society. So it's no surprise that hunger hurts, right? It hurts health, it hurts productivity, it hurts kids' educational outcomes. So this is a study that Bread for the World had done, and it's a little dated, so these costs are probably even higher now, of, you know, healthcare costs as a result of people not having adequate nutrition, poor educational outcomes. And, you know, if you look at that kind of graphic, there's lots of different ways that hunger impacts our investments in other things, right? You know, each dollar spent on education, some of that isn't being as effective as it could be if their child is sitting in a classroom hungry. Money paid for medications, right? Someone's not going to absorb that prescription medication as well if they're not eating properly. Next slide. So community responses to hunger, right? We met two of the best ones in Bucks County just a moment ago, are the food pantries. Next slide. And then the government programs. I'm going to start going quickly now because there's a lot of information you can look back at. Next slide. And again, SNAP is one of the best. So in Bucks County, there's about 40,000 people receiving SNAP benefits. And it really does directly help those in need. Because of COVID, and finally, after many legislative fights last year, at the end of the year, the bill that passed in December provided a 15% boost to SNAP benefits, which is originally was scheduled for January to June of this year. It's now been extended to September, but that we're worried that extra SNAP dollars really needs to go even longer, because it's going to take a long time for some people to get back on their feet economically. You know, even if all the immunizations, all the things that are happening now for us to try to get past COVID, if things go as well as we hope and things are get back to normal, it's still going to take a long time for many people to get economically back on their feet. Next slide. And this is just a reminder that, you know, charity can't make up for funding cuts to nutrition programs, right? It's wonderful. We would never say don't donate to a food pantry. Like, all the donations are wonderful, but for every one meal a food bank provides, SNAP provides 9. So it's just a reminder that we really do need advocacy and really do need to keep nutrition programs strong, because they are kind of the #1 defense against hunger in America in terms of investment. Next slide. Sorry, next slide. I guess I have a lot of transition slides in here. So again, I went through this earlier about you can do legislative advocacy, administrative, and program advocacy. So it's just a good thing to keep in mind that you don't always have to think about DC. There's many advocacy opportunities, even locally. Next slide. And this is also just, obviously a comic, but there are a lot of paid lobbyists, fighting for federal dollars for things that maybe aren't what those in our community who are the most needy really need investments in. So that's kind of all of our jobs, to try to make sure that we are serving those who need help the most. Next slide. And so this is just a little reminder of advocacy can fit in your schedule. I think everyone's busy, right? People have jobs, people have lives, and not everyone has the luxury like I do of doing advocacy as their job and being able to spend all day thinking about these things. But there are many things you can do quickly, right? In 15 seconds, you can share an article. And that is something that really is important. Part of advocacy is education, and educating not just yourself, but your neighbors, your friends, people about the problems that exist around hunger is really a great service. And if that's what you can fit in, you're still helping if people start to understand the broader context of hunger and not just making snap judgments about somebody who may need help. In 30 seconds, you can talk to someone more. I'm not going to read through all of these, but in 45 minutes, you can write an op-ed to the local paper. So there's lots of things you can do, and it's up to each person to decide what they can fit in their schedule. Next slide. So here are some tips, whether you're advocating for big or small. You have to know who you're trying to convince. You have to have, your evidence of what's going on in your community. You can educate yourself and others. And don't forget that resources are an important part of the conversation. So not just resources, obviously, to donate to a group like mine, to do advocacy, but resources in terms of budgets, in terms of what the government decides to spend on. It's a real priority statement. And the more all of us push our elected officials, not just when we vote for them, but as they're in office, to really direct resources to the things that are needed most, is incredibly important. And you have to be persistent and patient, especially with government. Very many things don't change quickly. Next slide. And this I'm not going to go through. I just put them in because there's been so much happening with hunger in terms of the COVID relief bills, that the next few slides, this one, and there are two more that explain what's happened with each of the bills that has passed. There's been an executive order that President Biden put into effect his first week in office. So there've been some things to really look at what can be done with hunger, but they're very detailed and in the weeds, and we don't have time to go into those today. But I would say that the SNAP increases and the creation of what's called the PEBT program, which is funding for families whose kids are remote now and missing out on school meals. Those have been really important things, as well as some extra investment in WIC, the Women, Infant, and Children's Program. Next slide. And then again, looking ahead, we're just going to need more help to continue to face these looming challenges as there are budget shortfalls, as there are new, battles in Congress to try to decide what to continue to fund at enhanced levels because of COVID, and we're going to need everyone's help. Next slide. And lastly, and I know I'm a little over my time, so I apologize, but this is how you can help fight hunger. You can sign up for newsletters, e-alerts. We have that on our website. You can follow other groups, and just really, again, reminding you of that slide that talked about it's about income. Like, you can pick what you feel most passionately about, but I think there's something we can all do to try to fight hunger in many ways. Know who your elected officials are, weigh in with them again once they're elected, not just in voting for them. Helping to build political will is part of that, again, is educating neighbors, talking to people about these issues. And you can donate to a food pantry, volunteer, all those kinds of things are good. So we'll stop at the next slide, which I think just says questions, and I'll stop there. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Kathy, and thanks to all of our panelists today. And we could devote a whole program to any one of the three of you. I'm so impressed by the scope. During this three-part series, we've heard from the macro level, we've heard from the micro level down to the YWCA providing shopping carts so that people without cars and with kids in tow can go off to the store and be able to carry their groceries home. food for pets, which Maddie brought up, which I think we don't think about, but think, we all have, well, many of us have beloved pets that we need to feed, just as we need to feed ourselves and our family members. So we've dealt with on the micro level, on the macro level, and so thanks to all of your contributions. And we've now heard from, over the course of the 3 sessions, we've heard from 9 people knowledgeable about and experienced in different aspects of the problem of food insecurity in Bucks County. Each has represented an organization working to address this issue in different ways. Each is crucial in finding solutions to it. Some work on the front lines with families and individuals. Others are focused on building and strengthening the food chain and distribution of healthy food to those lacking access. And still others are involved more directly in advocacy for systemic and larger scale solutions to the problem. As we stated at the beginning of the series, this is not a new problem. In fact, the League launched an initiative on hunger and food insecurity in 2001, 20 years ago. Listening to the presentations, it is clear that significant progress has been made in some areas since then, particularly in the area of bringing more produce and fresh products to those experiencing lack of access to nutritious food, and in the food support to students, including college students. We've also heard that this past year has seen an increase in public resources and an outpouring of private support dedicated to food insecurity as a result of the pandemic. But the resources coming from federal, state, and local, sorry, lost my train of thought here, and local plans will likely end in a year or so, and public attention will be drawn elsewhere. Yet we can be sure that the problem will not go away. It will not have been solved. And it will continue to exist unless we all work to bring about more permanent solutions. So we would now like to open the discussion as to how each of us can do something to make a difference. Like so many complex problems, this problem requires a multivariate approach and solutions, but each of us can help in our own way, and each of us can be advocates for access to good food for all. So I'd like to open to the 3 panelists some questions. One is, and we can start with Maddie and then go to the 2 Kathys. What do you feel is the greatest challenge to your ability to do your work?
It's I guess the greatest challenge is knowing that we have enough food. We never know how many people are going to come to a pantry session, and it's just, it works out by the grace of God, or whatever you like to say. But that's the thing that worries me the most, is that we will have enough to give people. It's probably the biggest challenge. And also another challenge is getting enough volunteers that are able to drive food from place to place, because we need to get food from Rolling Harvest. Sometimes we need to get food from grocery stores, and getting volunteers who have vehicles and the strength to lift stuff is a big challenge too.
It takes a lot more volunteers than I expect people realize. How many volunteers do you use, would you say, on a weekly basis?
Oh no, well, let me see. Well, on a monthly basis, it's about 60 people at both pantries. At each pantry, we've probably got about 4 or 5 people working at each session, and then we've got people behind the scenes. We've got a team of about 7 drivers at Doylestown that go and pick up. It's all the pickups from grocery stores tend to be early in the morning, so people who work and who tend, I mean, because I'm older, I can say this, people who are younger and more fit don't tend to be available when the food is available. So it's trying to find people that can sort of work in the time frame that we have to have. It's kind of hard sometimes.
So Kathy Snyder, what do you see as the greatest challenge that you are currently facing?
There's two things that come to mind that we're navigating and we're actively problem solving. I think that the challenge now that we've successfully, all of us, changed the narrative to get much healthier, fresher food into the food pantries, the challenge becomes two things. First of all, we're getting local, organic, heirloom varieties. Some of them are really cool and really exotic. We've got to develop our program more for nutrition, education, outreach. And I am so proud of our team. Every year, this is our 5th year, and we're putting more and more resources into working with food pantries and major distributions to make sure that if we drop off the kohlrabi and if we drop off kale and mustard greens, that the recipients know what it is, why it's so good for you, how it can be amazingly tasty, how to store it, how to get your kids to eat it. We've made great strides. In fact, Maddie can tell you that we had grown an entire community in Doylestown looking forward to the next kohlrabi distribution. So nutrition education just keeps growing. It becomes more and more important, and it's the best way that we can honor this gift from the farmers. And the second thing is, as the dynamic changes and more fresh food is getting into food pantries, because remember, food pantries were supposed to be a 3-day emergency supply of shelf stable. So how do you get all of this great food to food pantries that still don't have the cold storage infrastructure? And there's some very cool solutions we're all working around. Maddie has talked about helping to provide refrigeration in her food pantries, Phil Abundance and Feeding America, providing more cold storage. And the final thing, though, if that is still not getting to the end food pantry or hunger relief site, we're creating a model where they can come to us the same day, a couple of hours before they're going to distribute to a couple hundred families, get everything they need from our cold storage of what's just been harvested, and pick it up and distribute it. It bypasses the need for cold storage and infrastructure. That was a little wordy. Sorry about that.
No, it's interesting. I mean, obviously, I think communication between the different groups, and we've seen that in the 3 sessions. I mean, it's great. Everyone seems to know everyone, which indicates, of course, we saw Maddie in your video. It's great because it shows that you are all talking to one another and you find out things. We heard from Heather from the Opportunity Council that they had needed refrigeration, and they found out the county had some refrigeration units that weren't being used. And you wonder about stores, grocery stores that are, you know, giant food markets that are closing, and you wonder, well, gee, I wonder what's happening with their refrigeration units. You know, talking is a great way to find out where resources are that may be available that people don't know about. And the fact that all of the organizations seem to be working so well together, it gives cause for a lot of optimism that problems can be solved if everyone puts their heads together.
Senator Casey said that he thinks there is more collaboration, and Bucks County is known throughout the state for just how well we all communicate and work together. I think, yeah, we're really blessed to be in this kind of environment.
Well, we should all work to be the model for the rest of the state, if not the rest of the county. So maybe we're on our way. You're on your way. Kathy Fisher, what do you see as the biggest challenge facing you and your group in its work?
Well, I do think that, you know, COVID has really shown a spotlight on how much hunger is a problem in America, right? But many of us know it was a problem well before COVID. And I think one of the biggest challenges will be to continue to make sure there's adequate support and progress to, you know, kind of move ahead on some of the anti-hunger programs, make them better, make them stronger, in ways that honestly, some of the emergency legislation and some of the waivers that have been granted to programs so that they could operate safely with COVID are exactly what needs to happen for the long term. So I think it's just helping people to kind of wrap their head around the limitations of the low wages, the limitations of many employers providing part-time jobs, but not full-time hours. And your schedule may change every week. So it's hard to pick up a second job. Like, kind of really wrapping our heads around how hard it is for people who are working hard and trying to make ends meet and can't. And continuing to be sympathetic towards that and find solutions as opposed to judging that once things get back to normal. I think that's always been a challenge.
Yeah, I think we would all agree that food pantries, although they are, a great asset, particularly in these times, but they're not the best solution. I mean, as you say, you're working irregular hours. You've got a night job, you've got a day job. When do you get to the food bank? How do you, you have to find transportation. You have to maybe stand in a line. You have to go the hours it's open. So it's not a permanent solution. It's having more income coming into the household so that you aren't having to frequent a food pantry, or maybe only very rarely. But again, it's you pull on a thread and it's connected to so many things. Going from challenges, are there programs that you see going on elsewhere that you would love to see brought into this county, into something that you'd, and I'll start with Maddie. Is there any ideas or initiatives out there that you would love to see happening here in Bucks?
That's a tough question. We are open to anything, any suggestion to get food to people that need it. So we try and stay on top of things that are going on elsewhere, but I think we're really lucky with things like Rolling Harvest, and that things are pretty good here from many points of view. But I have to say, I would love to go out of business. I would love to be not necessary, because I've said to people, there is a wonderful food distribution system. It's called grocery stores, and that's where we should be sending people. And so I recognize that there's a need for food pantries, but it would be great if there wasn't.
Right, and you're working for the housing. I'm working for the housing group. I mean, you're attacking that problem as well. So, if you can find low-cost housing for people, then they'll have more money for food. I mean, again, you have to spend it one place or the other. The problem is when you just don't have enough to purchase everything.
People can be working really hard. They can be working 2 jobs and they're still not making enough money to have a decent standard of living, and it doesn't seem right.
Right. So how about you, Kathy Snyder, just as you're taking a drink here, what do you see an idea? I mean, I think a lot of programs are probably modeling themselves after you, but do you see things going on that you'd like to bring into your, Rolling Harvest rescue program?
I have a lot of ideas, actually. You had said, what would we like to see happening in Bucks County, I think was part of your question as well.
Yes.
So what we see happening around us is all of this momentum is being created globally, really, to address food waste and just the issue of climate change and how it's affecting our food supply chain and agriculture, and how we're possibly going to feed 9 billion people on the planet by the year 2050. I think on a micro level, we can bring some of those ways to mitigate that right to Bucks County. We can find ways to mandate that good organic food is donated and not sent to landfill or composted. We can get incentives for organizations to come up with a donation model that works for them, to partner with groups, to keep really healthy, wholesome food in the charitable food supply chain. There's things that we can do to mitigate how much our own local farmers need to get rid of. In fact, there are so many behavioral nudges that can happen if we embrace the wonky, the imperfect vegetable. If every farmer in our region can sell everything they grow, and it's not going to be going to waste, because that carrot with 3 legs, it might look funny, but you're going to chop it up in a super salad. It's going to be delicious. There's even some evidence. All right, possibly, I don't have the science behind this, but I know I've read a lot, that a vegetable that is slightly irregular has had to work harder to grow and has more of its own immunity and its own nutrients than because it has survived. It's just a matter of what looks appealing and what looks perfect cannot be the guideline of what we are buying as a community and what our farmers are able to sell. We have this impossible level of perfection and supermarkets being fully stocked at 3 in the morning. There's a lot of things that can happen right here in Bucks County that we can make these really significant nudges and possibly legislate changes.
Good, yeah, good thought. I do think the food waste issue is not really recognized by people. They don't realize, they don't think about it when they go to the grocery store and they see those just mounds of produce, and nobody thinks about the fact that how much of it is being thrown away. You don't like to think about that. And Kathy Fisher, question for you. So what would you like to see, and how do you think that there is specific, do you think our legislators are aware of what needs to be done, and what would you suggest in terms of advocating with our local legislators or state or federal legislators for that matter for passage of legislation that would help in this area?
Well, I mean, I think the level of awareness of elected officials varies tremendously. For instance, Kathy has come with me to meet with Congressman Fitzpatrick many times, and he is pretty aware and pretty good on hunger issues. He really does want to find solutions and work across the aisle. And I think it's a good thing to just always keep that door open. So we try to talk to him often, and as a group, many of us together, talking with him about hunger. At the state level, because the state does not fund a lot of the nutrition programs, I would say there are many elected officials at the state level who aren't so aware of exactly how these programs work and how much can be done to support them. For instance, many of you may know the state legislature is considering, they've been trying to potentially wrestle away the governor's ability to issue the emergency declaration around COVID. And that could have a real impact on hunger, because right now there are additional SNAP dollars that families get because of COVID. There's been it's called an emergency allotment. There's a little extra dollars that they are given. Many of you may have seen the headline in the paper last week about CLS winning a lawsuit that got some extra emergency allotment dollars to families who hadn't been getting them. That will go away in the future, not the settlement, but the ability for the state to issue those extra dollars to families will go away if Pennsylvania no longer has an emergency declaration, because the federal legislation requires both an emergency declaration at the federal level and at the state level in order for a state to qualify and issue those dollars. So that's a very concrete example of it would be helpful for everyone to call their state elected officials, their state house members, their state senators, and say, it's really important for Pennsylvania to continue to have the emergency declaration as long as is needed to really get past COVID, or we'll be turning away, it's over $100 million a month that's coming to Pennsylvania as a whole, so not to Bucks specifically, in emergency allotments that will go away if we don't continue the emergency declaration. And I know there's a question in the chat too, so I'm sorry, I'm going to take 2 more minutes. There was a question about how many people are working but still can't get by. And I would say when you look at the SNAP program, about 70% roughly is seniors, folks with disabilities. And I mean disabilities with a capital D. They're receiving disability benefits, or children. So I think there's a lot of judgment about SNAP being something like welfare, when really many people who are on SNAP, of the remaining, right? It's only, about 30% of those getting SNAP who are even adults that we'd expect to work. But among those folks, between 75 and 80% either have worked in the past year or will work in the coming year. So we have to look at this as kind of sometimes a revolving door. Many people need SNAP for a little while because they lost their job or their hours were cut or they have a health issue. That could happen to any of us. If you have a health condition, suddenly an emergency health, and you can't work for a while, that's when people get SNAP, right? And then they move back into work. So it's very often this moving target of people. It's not one population. It could be any of us. And those are the folks who are often, working wage jobs. Again, a reminder, if you're making minimum wage in Pennsylvania, full-time, full year, work 52 weeks a year, you earn just a little over $15,000. Even at $10.
I'd like to ask,
Sorry, go ahead.
I just wanted to ask about a couple of particular populations. One is, there was a question about prison population. And I don't know if any of you are aware, are there any efforts to bring, to look into the nutrition and food that prisoners have access to, and whether any fresh produce is available to them. Kathy, do you know anything about that, or?
I know that there's prison gardens, and I know that working with Commissioner Diane Marseglia, for example, over the years to provide hundreds of organic veggie seedlings from a lot of our partner farmers. Not just the prison garden system, but a program providing for juvenile detention to grow healthy food. And there's a lot of mental health benefit from spending a couple hours with your hands in the soil and the sun. Not just for people who are incarcerated, for every single one of us, we could benefit from a deeper connection with nature.
And I know we dealt with this briefly in our first session, but have any of you seen additional obstacles and problems among immigrant communities, particularly undocumented immigrants who might be hesitant to come forward to access some of this food, either to the food pantry or other agencies? Maddie, do you see any of that at
we do see, and it was we had to spend a lot of time reassuring people because they were afraid that coming to the food pantry would impact their ability to get a green card later, because they see us, especially us, because we're called Bucks County Housing Group. People think that we're part of the government, and we're not. But people were afraid. And there certainly is a need in that population to get healthy food. So we don't. People should know when they come to a food pantry, it's pretty easy, especially at the moment. All we ask for is their name and address. We don't ask for proof of anything. So so anybody that needs food can come, and just try and educate people that just because you come to the food pantry is not going to impact anything. But unfortunately, they are not eligible for some benefits, which is then, I believe, Kathy, they're not eligible for SNAP, for instance. So the food pantry network is doubly important for them.
Someone asked about how much time your programs have to spend fundraising. Is it, do you have to spend a lot of your staff hours looking for money? And to those of you out there, making donations is a wonderful way of advocating. It is another form of advocacy. The way you spend your dollars is the way you help have your voice heard. And so I certainly recommend people make donations to all of you. But how much of your time would you say you have to spend raising money? Any of you? I'll start with you again, Maddie. Go ahead.
I guess
maybe you may not be working on that side of things, but
we as an organization, we do have a development director, a manager that helps with that. But I mean, I think all of us are trying to advocate all the time. So I I've never sort of thought how much time it takes, but we will engage anybody in conversation. We'll give people tours whenever they want, so we can try and get people to see what we do. But I couldn't tell you the percentage of my time that I spend doing that. Sorry.
Fair enough. Fair enough. How about you, Kathy Snyder?
Yeah, I'll be brave. I'll take a stab at it. It's just this. The more time we spend asking for money is less time we can actually work and do our programs. So it's a necessary part of what we're doing, but we are a very small skeletal, small but mighty team of hunger warriors, and it's very time consuming. I would like, for example, to see federal funds be made much less cumbersome to participate in. We as an organization do not go after federal funds mostly because you've got so much paperwork and we would need a full-time person just to manage that. So we really depend on local donations. We've had tremendous generosity, and I have to say, it's a silver lining from COVID. The work that we do and the face of hunger used to be hidden. It's now front page news. People are aware of it. And we're really grateful. The more donations we get in, it frees us up to just focus on what's needed.
Gosh, yes. Yeah, well, I would say people were incredibly generous when COVID happened. It really did bring it to people's attention that people didn't have enough to eat. And it's very, I mean, everybody wants to make sure everyone has enough food, I think, fundamentally. Nobody wants anybody to go hungry. And we're so grateful that people recognize that and help us.
Well, we're so grateful to all of you for joining us today. It's been a wonderful three-part series. I've just learned so much. And again, I'm so impressed by how many wonderful, talented people are out there addressing this issue. And we know it's not an issue in and of itself. I mean, it's tied to poverty and lack of affordable housing and transportation and some healthcare and so many other things, but we'll have to call it a morning. So I'm going to turn it back to Monica. But again, thanks to all of you. Thanks to all of you who've joined us today and listened. I hope you've learned something. I hope you've been inspired to join in these efforts and contribute in some way, however small. And I'll turn it back to Monica.
Okay. Well, thank you, Liz. On behalf of the League of Women Voters of Bucks County, I would like to thank Malin Burgess, Kathy Snyder, and Kathy Fisher for a very informative program. I know I've received quite an education here. Hunger is indeed a problem in Bucks County, and we still have a lot of work to do. But these presenters have showed us that we are moving forward in the right direction. And now we know what needs to be done. So I'm encouraged. Here in the League, we have a common saying, your vote is your voice. But that doesn't mean that you can only use that voice once or twice a year on election day, right? In fact, each and every day, you can use your voice to advocate for the society you want to have. And I hope that after today's program, you can find a way to use your time, talent, and treasure to make a difference in a meaningful way. And speaking of your vote is your voice. I want to remind you that we have a municipal primary election coming up May 18th. You can go to Votes PA to check your registration status, polling place, or apply for a mail-in ballot. Of course, we encourage you to go to vote411.org to learn about the candidates on your ballot. And after April 15th, we're going to have all of our local candidates posted. And we have a big race this year at the municipal level. We have over 500 candidates in 300 races. It's a big one. Again, as a reminder, this series has been recorded and it'll be available on our website, Facebook page, and YouTube channel. And I just dropped the links in the chat there. You're going to be receiving a follow-up email in a day or so, which will include a short survey to help us design future programs, and we'd appreciate the feedback. If you want to learn more about the work we do here, I encourage you to visit our website, follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram, and subscribe to our YouTube channel. And of course, please consider becoming a member. We're a nonpartisan group open to individuals of all gender identities. And thanks again to all these League members who made this series possible. And I'm going to give a little shout out to two more Kathys It's the day of the Kathys today, right? Kathy Beveridge for all of her behind the scenes work with the Zoom, getting everybody in and out of those spotlights. And Kathy Widener, who's our Director of Communications, for all the publicity, getting the word out so you were able to attend this program. So that wraps it up. That concludes today's program and the series. And thank you so much for joining us, and hope to see you again at one of our future programs and at the voting booth. Okay, bye-bye now. Thank you.